century BC, from the hundreds of competing states that make up ancient Greece, one man leads his city to greatness. The city is Athens, and Pericles is not a king or prince, but an elected man. His power comes from the people and from his own single-minded vision.
The story goes that when Pericles' mother was 8 months pregnant with him, she knew that she was going to have an extraordinary son who was destined for greatness, because she had a dream that she gave birth to a lion, and for the ancient Greeks, the lion was always a symbol of leadership.
To be a successful politician and statesman in Greece, he needed to be a military leader, and he needed to be an effective speaker in the assembly, and he was clearly both of those. Pericles not only contributed to Athens becoming a leading power, I think he was the main creator of that power.
Pericles wants to send out a message to the world that Athens is supreme, the capital of a new empire. He will deliver this message by building. What he intends is the most costly and ambitious construction campaign undertaken in the Western world. He needs to fund it. In what some will see as an act of blatant theft, he raids the Greek treasury. Money, which should have been used to defend all the city-states in the region, is diverted to the glorification of his own city. And work begins on the Parthenon. Built to honor the goddess Athena, it will become the most imitated building in history, an inspiration to engineers and architects. It will take 8 years to build, cost the equivalent of $100 million, and use a staggering 20,000 tons of the finest marble.
The Parthenon is arguably the most influential building in world history. You cannot go into any city in North America or Europe, or indeed most of the world, without finding a 19th century bank facade, parliamentary building facade, or law court building that isn't in some way influenced by the Parthenon.
The Parthenon is a very special building because of the visual impact it has on you. When you go up there, it's first of all huge. Solid marble, there's not a straight line in it, so that it has a lightness and a sense of movement. When you stand on the Acropolis and look at it, it seems almost afloat.
The image of the Parthenon is familiar to us, but 25 centuries of war, weather, and history have reduced this building to a shadow of what it once was. Engineer Ed McCann and architect Manolis Koris have set themselves the task of deciphering exactly how it came to be built, what it looked like during Athens' golden age. Pericles' men cut marble for the Parthenon from the nearby mountain of Penteli. The team restoring the temple today get their marble from the very same place. What seems laborious, even with the aid of modern technology, would have taken months in Pericles' time. First, the marble was chiseled by hand from the parent rock. It was examined for faults, and then the business of transportation began.
It was a 10-mile journey, and they bought 20,000 tons of marble blocks with just teams of oxen and rollers, this incredibly long journey all the way up the steep Acropolis to get it there. This is an astonishing feat. It would be an astonishing feat today with proper cars and so on.
The most difficult part of the journey was the last part, getting the marble up a 302-foot slope. Ed McCann has discovered the ingenious technique that the masons used for lifting.
They had a very cunning system for getting the rocks up to the top. And what they did was they set up, they had a cart on one side with the rock on it, and up the top on the other side they have another cart full of stone with a big rope going round and over a giant pulley wheel. And then they set up the donkeys and the people all pulling down. And so they pull down and lift the rock up and then at the top they're able to unload it, and then they bring the horses up here, they put a rock on that side, and they bring it back up and down like that. So it's a counterbalance system.
The size of the challenge becomes even more impressive when Ed and Manolis calculate the weight of the marble. The individual blocks were vast.
So they had 8 cranes,
yes,
dotted around the Parthenon, and these were timber cranes,
yes,
and they lifted these pieces up into the construction, and the biggest piece was 13 tons. So about
yes, the biggest 8 pieces weighing 13 tons each.
The cranes were immensely strong, capable of hoisting a 13-ton column. They were also very simple in design. 2 wooden beams were connected by an iron bracket, and ropes were passed through a pulley block at one end. 200 men were employed on the site itself, but around the city, thousands more labored to support them. Masons, molders, founders, rope makers, transporters.
Manolis, are these the original pick holes?
Exactly. Second stage after bringing the stone from the quarry. It is one of the preliminary stages.
But the last time someone put their finger in there might have been 2,500 years ago.
Exactly, exactly.
Once it was in place, the most skilled masons carved the marble. Ed McCann wants to understand how they worked by trying it for himself.
The key principle that underlies working the stone is working from doing rough cuts with the stone through to gradually getting to finer and finer stone cuts, and that's reflected in the tools that they use. So that the tool that they used for rough cutting was this double pick. It's difficult to lift and it's difficult to aim. I'm reliably informed that if you were any good with this, I could move 200 kilos, that's about twice as much as I weigh, in an hour's work with one of these. Now, as you got into the stone and you needed to get finer and finer, you needed to use ever smaller tools, and I can put them exactly onto the bit of stone I want to hit to the nearest millimetre. It's much, much easier to use, and I can't really go too far wrong, but of course I don't get very much off with this. It would take me 2 weeks chiselling away, basically reducing the marble to dust before I'd move 200 kilograms.
Once the columns and drums had been finished, they needed to be fitted together.
So this is where the original stones were put together, and these were iron clamps.
Exactly. The clamp is missing, but you see the bed of the original construction.
And this would have been underneath, so you wouldn't have seen.
Always.
So it's underneath.
Yes, exactly. Hidden by the next course. Yes.
I see. Okay.
Today, damage from pollution means that the Parthenon needs extensive restoration. As Ed McCann hunts for clues about how the stones were originally put together all those centuries ago, he gets exclusive access to the work that's being done now.
This is the modern restoration work that is going on. And although it's different to what they did in Periclean times, there are some similarities. I mean, first of all, the column drums themselves are the same, and they're lifted up, in this case, by a great big iron and steel crane. In those days, it would have been a timber one. And you can see in the middle there a little metal spigot sticking up. Nowadays, it's made out of titanium, but in Periclean times, that would have been wood. And that's what helps you to center this thing. So when you lower it in with a crane, there's a little hole, and you line them up, and then you know you're exactly centered up.
Each wall, each column is evidence of extraordinary skill. The stones are perfectly positioned and seamlessly joined.
You see one of the best preserved joints in the Parthenon, because this column was never destroyed by any event like bombardment or earthquake.
These joints, you couldn't get a piece of paper in there, could you?
The outer structure required 46 of these 13-ton columns. The result was a building of unparalleled grandeur. Today, it is impressive, but as it stood in Pericles' time, it would have been breathtaking. Not just the exterior, but the interior, which has long since vanished. Our investigators will now concentrate on that interior and try to reveal it as its builders first saw it. Because the Parthenon once held the most spectacular statues ever made. What Pericles builds on the Acropolis is, in its time, revolutionary. It is at the center of his program to reform, remodel his city. This program is startlingly ambitious. It is also hugely successful. Pericles will change his world and help define ours.
Pericles managed to get his dream to come true, which was to build all those beautiful temples on the Acropolis and to have his name on our lips 2,500 years later.
And it appears that in his lifetime, these buildings were even more impressive, even more beautiful. Ancient writers describe the Parthenon's interior with awe. What they talk about is no longer here. In 1687, the Venetian army bombarded the city of Athens. The center of the temple was destroyed by a huge explosion. Now Ed McCann and Manolis Koris hunt among the ruins to decipher what clues are left. They want to understand what the Parthenon looked like when it was first built.
This is where a Venetian cannibal smashed into the column, bang, and the lines of stress fly out and a big chunk of the marble falls off. And they're all over here. We see one there, one there. I've noticed that you've got some Greek vandals, because that's graffiti, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yes. One of 230 graffitis in the Parthenon, many of them of historical value, pertaining to people thanking God for being saved in the sea after voyage back to Athens and so on.
A Greek sailor would have gone out in his ship, and if he'd had a successful voyage, he would have come back to the Parthenon, climbed up here and scribbled something on the wall saying, "Thank you very much, God."
Exactly, yes.
Fantastic.
Amongst the graffiti and the bomb damage, they spot other markings, traces of pigment that suggest this whole structure once looked radically different. The conventional picture of a Greek temple is one of clean white stone, but it appears that the Parthenon was once covered in color.
So the Parthenon was actually painted when it was
Yes, it
new.
was painted. It was a principle in ancient architecture to cover the buildings with paint, even in marble.
We can now recreate what it looked like. Gleaming white columns were topped with gables of blue, red, and gold. In fact, no other Greek temple was as intricately colored as this one. In addition to the painting, there were stunning sculptures. There were 92 statues. One frieze carved into the marble was almost 520 feet long. And the sculptures that adorned the gables were colossal.
I think the Parthenon is remarkable because if you look at the sculptures, and we can these days see them from behind and see that they're beautifully sculpted in the round, yet once up in the building, they could never be seen. It's hard to explain that, except perhaps the pride of the artists, the sense that they were doing this in honor of the gods and perhaps in honor of the city. Pride of workmanship.